I wanted to touch a bit on endometriosis today and sort of go over what it is, what some of the symptoms are, and maybe a couple of things that those with endometriosis can do naturally to help kind of manage some of those symptoms. All right, so endometriosis is a chronic and often very debilitating condition where the endometrium, right, the lining of the uterus, grows outside of the uterus on other organs and tissues in the pelvic cavity. And actually, not only in the pelvic cavity, but we now know from literature out there that this endometrial tissue can also grow in other areas of the body, like in the abdominal wall and even on the diaphragm and on and around the lungs. Now, the latter areas of growth are much more rare than the growths in the pelvic cavity, but they do exist. So, this ectopic endometrial tissue behaves just like the normal uterine lining. And unfortunately, endometriosis is not super uncommon. The data out there shows us that around 10% of women of reproductive age are affected globally. So, how does endometriosis happen? What actually is it that causes a person to get this? So, the exact cause of endometriosis is not fully understood, and there are a lot of theories out there. And not one single theory is completely proven to be the one true theory. But for a long time, the common thinking was that the main cause was from something called retrograde menstruation. And so, during a normal menstrual cycle, the endometrium is shed and expelled through the cervix and out the vagina, out of the body, right? But in retrograde menstruation, some of this shed endometrial tissue actually travels back up through the fallopian tubes and into the pelvic cavity instead of being expelled out of the body. So then these displaced endometrial fragments can implant and grow on the pelvic organs and tissues, and as mentioned before, even other areas within the body. And as these tissues are implanting and growing, they're developing their own blood supply and behaving just like the uterine lining does. It was thought that a good treatment was to get a hysterectomy with the idea that no period, no endometriosis. And then the same approach with birth control pills was, this idea that if we can stop the period, then the endometriosis will go away. But studies have shown us that endometriosis is not just found in women with periods. So these approaches we now know are not the only answer, because endometrial tissue has also been found in postmenopausal women, and it's been found in women who don't menstruate at all. So endometriosis is not just a gynecological condition, it's actually an inflammatory one. So, knowing this, we can say that retrograde menstruation is not the only cause of endometriosis. It may be a part of the bigger picture, but it's definitely not the only piece of the puzzle. So, again, the real causes of why this happens, right, of how endometriosis comes to be is a really big question mark. And there's still so many theories and unanswered questions. Overall, though, it's really believed to involve a complex interplay of a variety of factors: genetic, hormonal, environmental. And then we also can see in some literature that there's an immune dysfunction piece to the picture. Okay, so let's talk about some symptoms that those with endometriosis might experience. So, we're usually going to see the hormone imbalance favoring an excess of estrogen, right? And estrogen is really that hormone that says grow, divide, proliferate. So, it really promotes the growth and the proliferation of the endometrial tissue. And this hormonal dysregulation fuels the nature of endometriosis symptoms. So, women often experience pain. That is probably the most common symptom reported with this condition: pain with periods, pain with sex. Many women will have heavy periods, fatigue, headaches, GI upset like diarrhea, and then even depression and anxiety have been shown to be common symptoms with those that have endometriosis. And then also some symptoms as far as those who have charted their cycles. These have included things like spotting before and after the period, especially after the period, having more of that kind of brown discoloration. Heavier periods, like I mentioned before, low temperature for women that have tracked their basal body temperature. And just as a side note, low temperature can also indicate low progesterone. Women also report shorter cycles or even short luteal phases. And remember that the luteal phase is that time from ovulation to the start of the next period. And then also spotting mid-cycle. This could be another clue of endometriosis. Now, this is not to say that every woman that spots or has heavy periods or has a low temperature has endometriosis. So, just to be very clear on that, again, these are just some reported similarities with women who do have that diagnosis, and they've paid very close attention to their cycle changes. All right, so now let's briefly go over the stages. So, endometriosis is staged from 1 to 4 based on the location, the extent, and the depth of the endometrial implants. So, stage 1, or minimal endometriosis, involves only a few superficial implants of that tissue. Stage 2, or mild endometriosis, has more implants that might penetrate a bit deeper into the pelvic tissues. Stage 3, or what we call moderate endometriosis, is characterized by multiple deep implants, some of which might be larger lesions. And then stage 4, or severe endometriosis, involves many deep implants, large lesions, and extensive adhesions that can even start to distort the pelvic anatomy. So, now what about the big question? Can a woman with endometriosis get pregnant? So, endometriosis can definitely have an impact on a woman's fertility through several different mechanisms. First of all, just the distortion that can happen of normal pelvic anatomy from the adhesions and lesions can physically impair the transport of the egg and sperm, right? We need the egg to get through the fallopian tubes in order for pregnancy to happen. And scar tissue and adhesions can cause some transport issues. And then the chronic inflammation that's associated with endometriosis may also disrupt normal ovarian function as well as egg quality. So, if there's multiple adhesions surrounding the ovaries and ovulation does not happen successfully, then of course there's not even going to be an egg to be fertilized in the first place. But it is important to note that many women with endometriosis are still able to conceive, especially with proper management and interventions to control and kind of tame the disease down. So, what are some things we may be able to do to help naturally manage some of the symptoms of endometriosis? Well, we definitely want to limit our exposure to endocrine disruptors, right? These estrogen mimicking chemicals that can really push this disease further. We can really work on implementing a good anti inflammatory type of diet since this is an inflammatory disease. We want to increase antioxidants, include more nutrient dense foods into the diet, and really support the gut microbiome overall. We also want to make sure that hormone metabolism and detoxification is supported. We want to support the immune system, and we want to lower aromatase activity. And for those of you listening who maybe are not familiar with aromatase, this is the enzyme that is responsible for taking testosterone and converting it into estrogen. So, by lowering that enzyme's activity, we can help to lower and balance out maybe some of those higher estrogens. And this can be done through really targeted supplementation. And just some other lifestyle things we always want to be thinking about are things like getting good quality and good restorative sleep, exercising, right? Just getting the body moving, stress management, which is extremely important. And then even some targeted supplements can be helpful, right? So, in summary, endometriosis, again, is a very complex chronic condition that requires a comprehensive functional approach to manage. With the right approach and support, though, many women with endometriosis are able to manage their symptoms and even preserve their reproductive health. Thank you all so much for listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe.